Welcome to Executive Leaders Radio, your spot in the corner office, the radio show where executives share their secrets to success. Executive Leaders Radio.
You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen, with my co-hosts, Jeff Back, Marc, Drew Hanlon, David Jackowitz, Evolution Financial Group, Dave Birdwell, Topstack, Chris Glover, Employee Max, and Dave Stonecipher, Herbine. Jeffrey, can you give us a rundown on who we have on the show today, please?
Sure. We have a great lineup of guests. Colleen Morrone, President and CEO of Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County. Marc Helberg, Managing Vice President of Pariveda Solutions. Joseph Rizzello is Chairman and CEO of NewSquare Capital. And Matt Stroschein is the CEO of Ways Pharmaceutical Services.
Let's get to know our first guest, Colleen Morrone, President and CEO, Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County. Colleen, what is Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County? What are you guys doing?
We are a nonprofit here in Delaware and Delaware County that works to connect individuals in our community to a better quality of life through the power of work.
Mm-hmm. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
I was born and raised in Delaware, moved to Delaware County about 24 years ago, and I am the oldest of 4 children.
Mm-hmm. What was going on with you, 8 to 14, 7 to 13 years old?
I think work started hitting us at a young age. My parents believed in being strong role models in displaying work, and we were working in the community.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Drew Hanlon.
Colleen, how did your parents demonstrate hard work to you?
My parents both maintained jobs. My mom took care of the house, but she also used paper routes and delivering packages throughout the community. And my dad worked at Chrysler, moved here from New York, and also worked in a pizza shop and sub shop to offset some of the family expenses of raising a family.
And what do you bring to work every day that you learned from mom and dad?
It's absolutely hard work.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
Colleen, Goodwill's doing so many good things for the community, and you're driving the team. As a young girl, did you experience giving back to the community and some of those kinds of things?
Yeah, I think at a young age, it was more about demonstrating the need to work hard to be able to have a good quality of life and to raise a family. So I don't know that I was as active in the community at a young age.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Birdwell?
Colleen, I understand in the green room you told us that mom and dad got divorced when you were 12 or 13. How did your role change with your siblings at that time?
At that time, I was the oldest of 4. So, it was a change in our family, and it became an opportunity where I might have to step in and watch my younger siblings as my mother was working, and or go and help her work. So it was really filling the need at the time.
And what from that experience do you bring to Goodwill every day?
The need for people to work together. It takes a lot to run an organization, and you need everybody to do their part. And those small things help you do bigger things when everybody's contributing.
Mr. Glover?
Colleen, when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned that you worked in your mother's restaurant. What positions did you hold at that restaurant?
Yeah. When I started out, I was doing dishes and cleaning tables, and probably moved to taking orders. And as I became comfortable and I began filling orders for working the grill, and eventually opening and closing the restaurant to give my mother a break to be able to go home early.
Wow. How do you think that translates into what you're doing now with Goodwill?
I think, again, it takes knowing all the parts of a job, all the parts of the organization, and being able to understand them and dissect them and bring them all together to be able to run the larger organization.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Stonecipher?
Colleen, you mentioned you enjoyed playing basketball as a young child. What personality trait did you bring to those teams you played on?
I think at that time I was gathering the information and learning how to be part of a team. I think I was really one of those players that was watching and learning to be able to understand how to be an active participant on that larger team.
So how does that sense of teamwork translate to what you're doing today, leading your organization?
Teamwork's critical. Everything we do at Goodwill, all of the businesses that we run, whether it's our retail stores, our staffing business, our janitorial, or our sustainability initiatives, they all take a strong team that is moving in the right direction, that has the same goal to accomplish the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jackowitz?
Colleen, you mentioned in the green room that you got involved in local government and community. What was the impact of all that?
Yeah, I wanted to challenge myself to give back to my community. At Goodwill, we get over 650,000 donations a year from the community that support our mission of putting people to work. And I wanted to find a way to give back. It also put me on the spot to learn and grow. It put me in a position to be outside of my comfort zone and learning new experiences that I think have helped me to bring back to Goodwill to lead us in a different way.
So it says that you're the president and CEO of Goodwill of Delaware in Delaware County. Why don't you go get a job in business and go make a lot of money?
Yeah, one of the things my parents always said was get a job that has a retirement plan and that is going to help you grow and continue your education. So Goodwill provided me the opportunity 31 years ago that had a retirement plan and an education plan so that I could go back to school and get my education.
How long have you been with Goodwill?
31 years.
And when you started at Goodwill, what was your original role?
I was the administrative assistant to the CEO.
Just like working with the restaurant, your mom's restaurant, where you started doing one thing and at the age of 16 or 17, you were closing the restaurant. The same things happened here at Goodwill, where you started doing one thing and next thing you know, you're doing it all.
Yeah, over 30 years throughout lots of different positions in the organization, lots of education and learning, and the opportunity to do things unique and creative. Do you ever get
any feedback from the community that Goodwill's doing any good?
We do. I love that feedback. Of course, we also get the questions on how we can do better. And that's probably where we learn more is on the things that we can do better, the things we can do more of. But we do receive some great comments on things that we're doing in the community.
Like what? How are you impacting the community?
I think one of the most recent things that I can point to is during the pandemic last year. It was the highest unemployment that we've had. And Delaware reached out to us, the unemployment office, and said, we need to staff up the unemployment office. We've got thousands and thousands of claims that need to be processed. We sent staff in, they learned how to do that job, and then we placed over 30 individuals in the unemployment office to be able to efficiently manage those claims and get payments out to people in Delaware who really needed to get that money in their hands.
Which other co-hosts have what other questions?
What's the best part of your job, Colleen?
The best part of my job is seeing individuals that overcome a barrier to get into a job, whether it's giving them digital skills to be able to learn to work differently for today and in the future as our workplace changes, or it's their first paycheck. We work with a lot of youth and it's the first paycheck that they're going to get of their lifetime. And I remember that first time I got paid. And I think it's a great thing to be able to see these youth getting their first paycheck, and hopefully their memory will be of Goodwill in the future.
Who has what other questions?
I was going to ask a similar question to Jeff, but just, what your advice would be to somebody that maybe is a little down on their luck or needs a little assistance. You see people in tough spots. Like what's your advice to somebody?
There are so many organizations that are out there to help individuals that need assistance, whether it's finding a job or with mental health issues or housing, food, seek those resources and let individuals help you to overcome them. Having people who can support you, to work with you to get through that tough time is probably the best support that you can have.
The website address for Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County? GoodwillDE.org. Let me have that one more time. GoodwillDE.org. We've been speaking with Colleen Morrone, President and CEO of Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. To learn more about our executive leaders, stick around. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break. Don't go anywhere.
Recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, Executive Leaders Radio. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable. Yes, this radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors for free exposure.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Marc Helberg, Managing Vice President of Pariveda Solutions. What is Pariveda Solutions, Marc? What are you guys doing?
Sure. Pariveda Solutions is a consulting company that solves our clients' problems through the implementation of technology.
All righty. Where are you from originally? How many brothers and sisters, and where are you in the pecking order?
I am from New York City originally, and the New York metropolitan area, and I have one older brother, so I'm the youngest of two.
8 to 14, what kind of stuff were you up to?
I was doing one of three things, playing baseball, playing music, or working with my best friend on a landscaping company that we started.
Mr. Jeff Mack.
So, Marc, tell us about mom and dad. Growing up in New York, what were mom and dad doing?
So my father was in the travel business. He worked for a travel trade show company. And my mother was a physician's assistant.
Which one are you more like, Marc?
I'm probably more like my mother, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what do you take to work from mom every day? What are the characteristics?
So the characteristics come from the fact that my parents got divorced when I was about 13. And my mother at that point took my brother and I down to the basement and said, "Gentlemen, this is the laundry. This is how you do your laundry. And I'm happy to do your laundry if you want when I'm doing laundry, but if you want clean clothes and I'm not doing laundry, I'm going to teach you how to do that." And she put it under her philosophy of always answering a question, what would you do if I wasn't here?
Interesting.
What's that have to do with how you're building this business?
So it really puts a good perspective on where you need to have a mindset of, the buck stops here. I'm the one who has to figure out what has to get done. And if your colleague or partner or boss wasn't there, how are you going to solve the problem?
Perfect. Mr. Jackowitz.
So you had mentioned, being in a band. What was your role in the band?
So I played both bass and guitar in various bands that I've been in.
So what was in regards to people, what was your people role in the band?
So I was generally the band leader. While I wasn't the front person, I was making sure that everything was getting done. The set lists were complete. The band was actually working as a unit.
How do you think that ties into running your company today?
Well, it's absolutely helped me recognize that every person has a part to play. Not everybody is an expert in everything. And that if you don't coordinate those parts correctly, in concert, if you will, things might not go the way you think they should go.
Mr. Birdwell?
Marc, I understand you started a landscape company with your best friend. At what age did you start that company?
At about 14 years old.
And tell me more about that.
So my best friend and I thought we would need to make some money to do the things that we wanted to do as kids, and came up with an idea of just working in our neighborhood, cutting people's grass and raking their leaves.
And what did you learn from that experience that you're taking to work every day?
There are two major things I learned. One is that you need to be true to your word. You need to meet your commitments that you've made to your customers. If you say you're going to be there at 10 o'clock, you be there at 10 o'clock, because there is a ripple effect to that. The second thing I learned is that there is a cost side to every equation. So if you break your rake, you actually have to buy a new one, and that comes out of your profits.
Mm-hmm. All right, I understand there. Drew?
Marc, what was it like growing up in New York City?
It was really very interesting in that I was exposed to a lot of diversity. I was born in the Bronx and spent the early part of my childhood there. And also learned how to apply a little bit of Northeast toughness or grit in certain situations when required.
And do you bring that grit to your business today?
I do. Not in an offensive way in any way, shape, or form, but as the voice of reason or the voice of, hey, sometimes you just got to say the way it is when you're in a room with people.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Stone Cipher?
Marc, as we were chatting earlier this morning, you mentioned you had the opportunity to live abroad as a child. I'm curious, what did that experience teach you that you bring to work today?
Yeah, we as a family took a trip to Italy. I have family in Italy. My mother is Italian, and we spent 2 months there. So it was maybe an extended vacation, so living abroad. I learned a couple of things. One is that just because you do something one way in the country or city or state or company that you're from doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, that there are perfectly acceptable ways to do things. Second thing I learned was it's super important to learn a different language, be bilingual, because it's very helpful and exposes you to many different cultures, different ways of doing things, and just opens up your world quite a bit.
What's that have to do with what you're doing nowadays? I don't understand.
Well, there's more than one way to implement a technology solution, and you need to be open to the different ways to do that. So that's applicable there.
Interesting. Mr. Glover?
Marc, you clearly have a trend of diversity, whether it's sports and music or traveling and languages. How does that trend of diversity impact you and your business currently?
I think it's been helpful in that we don't have to look for diversity. It's just something that I've become used to. Now, certainly there's progress we all need to make from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. But when we were assembling our management team, for example, it's actually majority of women. We didn't intend to do that. We didn't say, hey, we want it to be majority of women, but the concept of being diverse is just the way we go about doing things.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mack?
So, Marc, in the category of what would you be doing if you weren't running Pariveda, what activities are you involved with outside of the company?
So I'm involved in a couple of things, and I think the answer to that, there's two answers to that question. Yeah. What would I be doing? Probably touring the world as a rock star. But I am involved in a number of other things outside of Pariveda. I sit on the board of the Arts and Business Council of Philadelphia. I'm on the advisory board at WHYY, the Community Advisory Board there. So I'm very interested in the integration of arts and community.
And why are you doing that stuff? I mean, why don't you just work, 12, 18 hours a day and just make more money? I mean, why do those things? I
think it goes back to the concept that I talked about that my mother taught me of what would you do if I wasn't here, and helping organizations figure out how to assess their environment and their problems from a perspective that's not a day-to-day business perspective. For example, WHYY is interested in putting programs on the air, but they have a business to run. So how can I help them think about the larger problem?
Marc, earlier you mentioned in the green room that you came from a large extended family, that you've got, that you're the youngest. I think you mentioned you had 13 cousins. And you mentioned you had seven mothers. You just mentioned that a lot of the folks you work with are women. Is there a connection between having seven mothers, and what do you mean by seven mothers?
I'm
working
sure.
with all these women.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a connection there. When I say I had seven mothers, I was the youngest of my entire generation in my family. So my female cousins and my aunts took a special interest in making sure that I was covered. I think they probably felt as the youngest, I might have been getting the short end of the stick. And then even subsequent to that, my mother was sick, and some of them took over the care of my brother and I. We were adults at that point, but they felt an obligation to take over that care. I do believe that there is a direct connection to being able to work with women because of the exposure I had. I would suggest that my youth was dominated by women in positions of authority versus men in positions of authority.
So therefore, you're comfortable finding the best people. It doesn't matter whether they're men or women and where they fit. So you're trying to make a match. You're making a match between your client's needs and your team. It's just a matter of the right people. There's no bias there.
That's exactly right. Right people in the right situation at the right time.
Mm-hmm. And that came from your being the youngest of all the cousins and having seven moms.
I think so. I think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, it certainly sounds like you were supported, and it sounds like that's what you're doing for a living, is supporting.
Exactly. I was incredibly supported, maybe even to the detriment of having to learn how to live by the "what would you do if I wasn't here" philosophy. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Website address of Pariveda Solutions?
It's parivedasolutions.com. That's Pariveda solutions.com.
We're Zoom with Marc Helberg, Managing Vice President of Pariveda Solutions, here on Executive Leaders Radio. We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. We'd like to introduce Joseph Rizzello, Chairman and CEO of NewSquare Capital. Joseph, what is NewSquare Capital?
NewSquare Capital is a registered investment advisor that manages individuals' wealth. We financial advisor professionals hire us to manage their client and help them build wealth over the long term, and underline long term.
Where you from originally? How many brothers and sisters? Where are you in the pecking order?
Born and raised in Philadelphia, South Philadelphia to be specific, an older sister and a younger brother.
Mm-hmm. And 8 to 14, what kind of stuff were you up to? What were you doing?
A bunch of different things. Always loved to come out the door. I lived on a narrow street, row home. Loved coming out the door and playing sports in the street that we would make up. And in addition to that, I was a paper boy, worked in a grocery store. And then when I was in high school, got the opportunity to go up to Center City and work for Reuben H. Donnelly, filling orders for them at 401 North Broad.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey?
So Joseph, tell us about mom and dad. What were they doing when you were growing up?
My dad was an automobile salesman. He worked for Potomkin Chevrolet, University Motors. And my mom worked in the home and raised our family.
Which one are you more like, mom or dad?
I think I'm a combination of both.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever go to work with your dad at the car salesman?
I did. I love going to work with my dad periodically, hanging around in the showroom. I like the smell of new cars. Got to sit in them and follow my dad around while he interacted with people in the sales process.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
So you mentioned your father was a bit of a dreamer. What was the lesson to be learned from that?
Yeah, my dad always shot for the pot at the end of the rainbow. Many times he didn't get there. A lot of times he didn't get there. And I realized that it was okay to fall down and fail at times. There were lessons to be learned there.
Joe, you ever think you had the tremendous success you've had because Dad was such a dreamer?
Yeah, I think that has something to do with it. He taught me to think big and don't be afraid of it. And it's okay if you fall.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Birdwell?
Joseph, in the green room, you told us that growing up, your grandmother had a big impact on you. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so my grandmother immigrated from Italy I guess she was 16 years old. She was the mother of 11 children, and my grandfather, who I never knew, died very young, and she raised her family, and she had a big influence on me. She would take me with her when she went shopping. Back then, they bought in bulk, and the words of my grandmother always ring in my ear, and that was that when you go to work for somebody, whatever you're doing, give them if they're going to pay you, give them a hard day's work. If it makes much more sense if you go in and you're happy. If you find yourself complaining, be honest with the employer, find a new job.
And what's the biggest takeaway from her that you take to work every day?
Integrity.
Mm. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Well, I think that it's much easier to handle yourself with integrity when you're in the business world. Be a person of your word. When you're given a task to do, make sure you see it through, make sure you finish it, and be able to work and work as a team member rather than an individual to contribute to whoever it is that you're working for.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Glover?
So you mentioned that you like to go out and play sports in the street that you created. Can you give us an example of one of those games?
Yes. So in South Philadelphia, South Philadelphia is an area of diversity, lots of different ethnic groups, Italian, Polish, Irish. You have all the different ethnic groups. And so we would invent our own sports, and we played a sport called box ball, or midget, however you want to call it, with a pimple ball, and organize it. You just walk out the door, a bunch of kids in the street, ask our neighbors to move their cars so that we can form the box and play the game.
Did you only play with the kids in the street, or did it get beyond that?
Well, what we did there is I had this idea that it would be a lot of fun because we enjoyed playing the sports. And by the way, we used to draw a crowd. Our parents used to sit around and cheer for us. So I always was adventurous, and I went out of the neighborhood, visited other parishes, kids in other neighborhoods, and invited them to our neighborhood, and we would set up tournaments.
Wow. So box ball tournaments, do you think there's any correlation between you scheduling your box ball tournaments and your role at the Philadelphia Stock Exchange?
Yeah, I do. I think that I realized that the ability of networking, in other words, getting out of your comfort zone, moving out of your neighborhood, meeting other people, and going to the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. I used to like to call the floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange where all the traders were, a floor of neighborhoods, people from different diverse groups that would form on would meet on the floor of the Philadelphia Stock Exchange and create these great businesses and provide some economic solutions for investors all over the world.
Wow. Didn't you mention that one of the things that you found terribly exciting was some international stuff? It sounds to me like it's going out of the neighborhood again. It sounds like when you were doing the box ball and recruiting kids from other parishes. What was this international thing you did with the Philadelphia Stock Exchange?
Well, I consider myself so lucky. I've lived a charmed life. Here, a kid from South Philadelphia eventually winds up working for a prestigious organization like the Philadelphia Stock Exchange. We created a product called currency options, which is a form of money insurance. Multinational corporations doing business across their borders, they had foreign exchange risk. So that took me all over the world. Nick Giordano, who was my boss back then, gave me the opportunity to build a team, travel, and educate multinational corporations and banks how to use these currency options. And today I could say that I'm fortunate enough to have friends all over the world in many different countries.
Is there a parallel between that and you going and getting kids from other parishes to play box ball?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, early on, it took me out of my comfort zone, took me out of the neighborhood, and made me realize that there are people all over Philadelphia that you can share ideas with. And so later on in my career, I had the courage basically to go to other countries that spoke different languages, and smile and enjoy myself. And people are people all over the world. We're the same, even though we may speak a different language and grow up in different cultures.
Mr. Stonecipher?
You had a couple jobs as a kid, and you mentioned some of them required commuting uptown, as you worded it. So tell me about some of those commutes. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so I guess my first opportunity to go uptown, which was pretty exciting as a young boy in my teenage years. I guess I was a freshman in high school. I had a job with Reuben H. Donnelly, only 4 stops on the subway. And I'd get off maybe 3 or 4 blocks before because I wanted to walk through Center City. And I noticed that they had these boardroom corner stores, but they were brokerage firms. And I remember pressing my nose up against the window, watching the ticker tape and all of these folks running around like they had a mission. And one day, an elderly gentleman walked out of the boardroom there, and I asked him what they were doing in there, and he said, "Well, that's the stock market. That's how you invest in America." And I found myself then, because we didn't have smartphones back then, we didn't have the internet back then. I remember going to the library and reading about the brokerage business, and that's how I became very interested in it. It was fascinating to me.
So that moment, I think, actually broke.
What are you talking about? What was fascinating to you?
Well, that you can invest in America through a corporation that was listed on the stock exchange, and if that was a good company, and the price of that, the price of that stock rose, you made money. If it went down, you lost money. But investing in America, corporations that were innovative and creative and bring in products and services that consumers would either buy or sell. So it was fascinating.
How young were you when you found this fascination?
I was a freshman in high school, so I was 14, 15 years old.
Mm-hmm. What's the website address for this organization known as NewSquare Capital?
NewSquareCapital.com.
Mm-hmm. You were 14 years old when you got interested in this industry and rose into Philadelphia Stock Exchange, and now NewSquare Capital. We've been speaking with Joseph Rizzello, Chairman and CEO of NewSquare Capital, here on Executive Leaders Radio. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com. That's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. We'll be back in a moment right after this quick break.
You now can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Yes, you can recognize your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Simply visit executiveleadersradio.com, securely enter their info, and we'll reach out to spotlight your deserving business advisors on our nation's leading Business with Heart radio show, executiveleadersradio.com. Don't wait. This radio and online social media and search engine exposure is quite valuable to your advisors. Yes, this radio and online social media exposure is free and quite valuable to your business advisors who deserve to be recognized. Visit executiveleadersradio.com now to nominate your deserving business advisors.
We're back. You're listening to Executive Leaders Radio. This is your host, Herb Cohen. I'd like to introduce Matt Stroschein, CEO of Ways Pharmaceutical Services. Matt, what is Ways Pharmaceutical Services? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, Ways Pharmaceuticals provides regulatory strategy and submission work for pharmaceutical and biotech companies.
Where you from originally, brothers and sisters, pecking order?
Yep, from State College, Pennsylvania, and I am the youngest of 3.
And 8 to 14, what kind of stuff were you up to?
Yeah, as a typical kid playing sports, football, and baseball, and then started my first job as a janitor in a bagel shop.
You started your first job as a janitor in a bagel shop. How'd you get that job? Why'd you get that job? And what'd you do different than all the other kids there?
Yeah, my mom volunteered me. She worked at the school district where the bagels were delivered. She volunteered me to clean the shop. I think she saw I needed an outlet and wanted me to have some activities to keep me busy.
Mm-hmm. So what'd you do different than the other kids that worked there? What'd you do different?
I think it was the drive. I mean, balancing the regular, working at school, doing the work at the bagel shop, being able to balance the sports. That was the thing that they saw for me. And I wanted to grow. I started learning about the bagel shop and ended up becoming a baker and doing different jobs within that group.
So as a young kid at the age of 13, you exhibited this proclivity to start doing one thing and to follow it along as opposed to doing things like, for example, you started working as a janitor and you rose to be the baker. Let's see if this appears throughout the course of your career. Jeffrey?
So Matt, in the green room, you were telling us that your father was a pharmacist. Did you ever go to work with your dad in the pharmacy?
Yeah, I did. I was able to go. I mean, those are long hours, 9 to 9, but yes, I was able to go with him.
And you're in the drug business today. Did the fact that your dad worked in a pharmacy and did your relationship with your dad kind of push you into the industry that you're in now, or influence it?
Absolutely. I think going there with him, seeing the drug development and also how he's making drugs, the customer service, but also the ordering of the drugs and the stocking and the different things has played a role in my business now.
Interesting. What kind of stuff were you thinking about? You mentioned earlier in the green room that when you were working with your dad, you began thinking about other stuff, which I didn't think was that normal for a 13-year-old kid who got stuck working with his dad. What were you thinking about then?
Yeah, for me, it was looking at the different analytics of the drugs coming in and how that had to flow and when they needed to be in and the service part of it and how that all fit together from a business standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Glover?
Hey, Matt, I'm curious. You have two other siblings. Were they also voluntold to start work at 13?
No, I'm the risk taker of my siblings, so they are much more calm and have a direction that they were going in. I think for my mother, she had an excited kid that needed something out, and that was the volunteer for her work.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Stonecipher?
Matt, when we were speaking earlier, you struck me as a exceptionally curious kid. I'm curious where that came from. Where did that curiosity come from?
Yeah, it's always been the analytics in me to work in different things and see how it worked and what were the next steps and what was going to happen, 3 months from now and 4 months from now, and that type of activity. And it's just kind of how my brain has always worked.
How does that translate into what you're doing at Waze now?
Yeah, absolutely. With Waze, drug development is a 15 to 20-year process. So you need to be looking ahead and understanding what's going to be going on. And to have that vision of what might happen next is crucial to being successful with our clients.
Mm-hmm. Drew?
You mentioned playing a lot of sports as a youth and you were the quarterback of your football team. What would your teammates tell us about you?
I think they would tell me, about me is I'm definitely straightforward. I was the one in the film room all the time. So I always had critiques and knowing what they needed to be doing, but it was also the supportive fact. With football, you need to know when to take a chance, when you need to do different things. And that translated to the relationship with my folks and how do you drive them in certain situations, but know their limitations as well.
What do you bring from that experience to work every day?
Yeah, I think it's bringing the people in that you want to be around. Pharmaceuticals is a very dedicated business. There's a lot of up times and down times, and you need to bring in the right people, but you need to give them the vision of where we're going, but let them do their part and not be micromanaging them and putting them in something they don't want to be. So that growth for them is what drives them to do this work.
Mr. Birdwell?
Matt, what was it like growing up in State College?
State College is great to grow up in. There's so many opportunities. I remember, selling water bottles to folks going to the football games and the traffic, the different activities you can get into, but also the experiences with a college town and the different people that you get to meet. There's never a dull moment. So in turn, it gets you out there to meet different folks.
Would you say that's where you developed your entrepreneurial spirit?
Absolutely. I mean, driving and doing the bagel shop, wanting to be a baker, but then, meeting Joe Paterno as he comes in for a bagel drives you to want to do other things and meet other people. So it was always exciting.
And what would you say you take from that experience to work every day?
I think it's the understanding of taking those risks and looking for the opportunities. Drug development has changed drastically over the past 20 years. And you need to always be looking for that change in that environment and what's going on next.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jackowitz?
In the green room, you were talking about being the youngest of three, and then now you work with your brother. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the catalyst was to get to that point?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with my brother and sister, they're both older than me. I was kind of taken care of. They oversaw and wanted to look out for me. So as I grew and I became more of the risk taker, my brother and I now work together. He's my CFO, and having that relationship of a trusted partnership with your CFO is crucial in this type of business. And it's been able to be very successful for both of us.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Jeffrey?
So Matt, you grew up with parents each owning kind of their own business, but you worked for Claris and Octagon, leaders in the industry and larger companies. When you went to start Waze, where did you get the risk-taking, gut feel, and how did your wife feel about you starting your own company, leaving these larger organizations? Yeah, it's definitely been a ride. I got to say, when I talked to her about it, it wasn't the first exciting thing she wanted to know about, doing this over again, but also having the mentorship and the leadership that I went through with Claris and Octagon kind of gave me that push. I have always known I wanted to do something like this, and this was the time to do it with the team that I had. And what are you most proud of what you've created so far here at Waze, Matt? I definitely think it's the team. Again, we work in drug development, and I've seen drugs that truly help people and what they do in their lives, and being a part of that and letting people go into that with that knowledge has been great. Knowing that these people have really driven that process through is an accomplishment in itself. And what's the future looking like? Are there more opportunities tomorrow, or were there more opportunities yesterday? There are definitely more opportunities tomorrow. Drug development and the growth with all the achievements that science is making, it just leads to what is next. And that's exciting for what we're going to see over the next 5 and 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Matt, how high is up? When are you going to stop?
That's a good question, because it's always been my dream to grow another large company and be a part of that. So I don't know what to say about the next 5 to 10 years, but I know we're going to push hard for sure.
I guess the one of the benefits of running your own business is you get to go in at 10 and leave at 3, and you don't have to work weekends and stuff like that, right? Not in my case, and not in my choosing. I think the work environment that we're creating within Waze is not a 24/7, but it's an attitude that you need to get in and you need to get the job done with what we're working on. So the 9 to 5 is not something I've ever enjoyed. I like working and doing these different things, so it allows me to kind of promote that. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you and your wife raise horses. Why?
Yeah, my wife has always been into horses. I love the adrenaline rush of riding a horse and jumping a wall or jumping something. It's something that you have to be focused on. It takes your mind off of everything else. You have to be focused on what you're doing. And it gives me a nice outlet to have that adrenaline rush.
Drew usually asks the question, what do you like when you're in that zone? What are you thinking about when you're in that zone?
It actually slows down for me. You start thinking about the practicality of what you're doing. So it's really interesting to feel your body kind of slow down and everything moves at a snail's pace. I mean, I remember Michael Jordan telling me when he's playing well, the game is slow to him. That's the feeling when you get when you're riding a horse.
Mm-hmm. What's the website address of this organization known as Waze Pharmaceutical Services?
Yep, it's wazeps.com.
Let me have that one more time, please.
Yep, wazeps.com.
We've been speaking with Matt Stroschein, CEO of Waze Pharmaceutical Services here on Executive Leaders Radio. Jeff, could you give us a rundown on who we've had on the show today, please?
Herb, what a great show. We started with Colleen Morrone, President and CEO, Goodwill of Delaware and Delaware County. Marc Helberg, Managing Vice President of Pariveda Solutions. Joseph Rizzello, Chairman and CEO, NewSquare Capital. And just now, Matt Stroschein, CEO of Waze Pharmaceutical Services.
I would like to thank my co-hosts, including Jeff Mack, Marc, Drew Hanlon, David Jackowitz, Evolution Financial Group, David Birdwell, TopStack, Chris Glover, Employee Max, and Dave Stonecipher, Herbine, for giving me a hand, structuring the questions, hopefully providing our listening audience an educational and entertaining show. I'd like to thank our listening audience for listening. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a radio show. Don't forget to visit our website. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. It's executiveleadersradio.com to learn more about our executive leaders. Thank you for joining us today and have a nice day. Bye-bye.